Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, my co-host Justin Baker, and as you are a Red Wings fan, and here we go. Tyler Bertuzzi has the week of his life when the games finally mean something, because the more you win, the less chance you have of getting a really good player at the draft.
Good for them.
And here we go. The Red Wings finally winning games when all it is doing is hurting them.
Jeez. It's funny. I was just telling Mark, for our listeners, I'm not sure if you guys caught the tweet that we put out, but the top line for the Wings, Bertuzzi, Larkin, Mantha, 30 points in the last 5 games.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Ridiculous.
That's phenomenal.
And against teams like Boston, they actually, it was very, very entertaining to watch Detroit against Boston. Witkowski, actually, he's, people love him in Detroit when he starts fighting and beating people around, which is just weird that it's not the NHL's game anymore, but yet Detroit still clings to some of those players. But
yeah, and it's funny because they never really played. They haven't played like that, like when
since the
Babcock was
mid-90s.
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
But I mean, regardless, it's great to see them have some effort and show some spunk. Don't choke there. But like, why? I would be playing your bottom line guys as much as possible to get them more experience. Get them more ice time. So you do lose.
I mean, I guess Tyler Bertuzzi would be in that camp, though. He's getting great experience.
He's still a top 6 guy for the Wings, though. But
here's the problem. You hear people say things like, well, this time of year, you don't necessarily, here's where these guys are getting their opportunity. Post-trade deadline, everybody's here. Most of these guys are going to be here next year. And so let's see what you're made of. Problem is, these games mean nothing. And so, you're going in and you're playing Boston. Great. What's Boston playing for? Maybe the Leafs could overtake Boston for home ice. At this point, Boston needs to win one of their last 3 games. Actually, they need if the Leafs were to win their last 3, Carolina, Tampa Bay, and Montreal. So
Carolina and Montreal all fighting for playoffs.
I'm gonna say it's unlikely they win all 3 of those. But if they did win all 3, Boston would need 3 points to secure home ice. So it is still possible. After everything that's happened, it is still possible that they could get home ice. But unlikely. It's unlikely to me.
Is.
So at this point, you're Boston. You're not really playing for a whole lot. And so I think your guard is maybe down a little bit. And, it's just...
No, most of those teams at this point of the year, they're trying to figure out their lineups to be ready for the playoffs so they can get guys, a few shifts together and be like, okay, Cool, develop some chemistry because come playoff time, this is who you're playing with.
Yeah, we know the Leafs are playing Boston. That is what's happening. There is like a, game. It could, again, there is a, looking at, I don't know what it is statistically, but when I consider what are the chances of Boston losing 2 of 3 and not getting a single point in overtime or anything in those, and the Leafs winning all 3 games, that's
2% chance.
I mean, actually, technically, Boston could lose all their games and the Leafs just win 2 and they win they get home.
That's true.
But what are the chances again of Boston losing all 3 games? They are playing Columbus next. Columbus is on a tear.
Bobrovsky is on a tear.
Yes, and I'll say this. For star of the week. The only reason why Tyler Bertuzzi wasn't the first star of the freaking week. We've definitely seen a Bertuzzi be the star of the week, but not Tyler.
Ooh.
You said it on the last show that you thought that Montreal would ultimately miss the playoffs.
I did.
Since then, I've come into your camp. I do think that I don't necessarily think Montreal is going to miss the playoffs. I'm not sure there, but I am pretty confident that Columbus is going to make their way in. And I want them to. Here's why. That game, Montreal and Columbus, I don't know if you got a chance to catch it. I think I was texting you a little bit.
Yeah, I watched pieces of it.
And it made me want Columbus in the playoffs because they looked so much more entertaining than the Montreal Canadiens, which I think we know in our heads. Columbus has more talent, just natural, pure skill than the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens have done what they've done through a system game and everybody contributing. And now they're without Paul Byron for who knows how long. And that's a whole discussion that we could get into, but I don't really want to. Him fighting Mackenzie Weegar. But Columbus looked good.
Yeah.
And I want to see them play. I'm just hoping that they play Tampa instead of Washington. I really want to see them play Tampa.
Ooh.
And I mean, that would be the most difficult first round draw for Tampa.
I still think Carolina would. I don't know necessarily if Carolina would be more difficult than Columbus, but I think it would just be as entertaining from a viewership standpoint. And I think either team could really go on a tear offensively against Tampa. Now, and again, this is all dependent on Victor Hedman's health. But when I look at, okay, for instance, Montreal, right? You talk about the sexier team in the playoffs, right? It makes me think of the Colorado Arizona battle for that last wild card spot right now too, right? Arizona would be great to have in there, but it's just more fun, more entertaining to have McKinnon and Rantanen in there. So, yeah, same exact ordeal. But, I mean, Columbus on paper would look like the harder matchup for Tampa Bay. So, yeah.
I mean, there's no promises that Carolina makes the playoffs.
No, not right now. They're only a point up with 3 games left. So, we'll see.
I mean, I know, like Montreal does have to play Tampa, and Tampa Bay's going for the record. They did win game number 60.
They did.
They are now tied for the second most wins in the history of the league.
Third
with 3
team
games
ever
left
to do
go.
it.
Yep. And so we'll see if Tampa can jump in and beat that record. I mean, I guess that's got to be on your mind when you're playing. But now you're without Hedman. That last game of the season, are you going to see maybe Stamkos take a seat? Will you see
Louis Domingue in net?
Yeah. I mean, that's. I mean, you are going to see Louis Domingue in net. I think probably the likely scenario, because of when the playoffs start. They start on the 10th, that Wednesday, and certain teams, I think, know which day, Wednesday or Thursday, when they're going to start. But the last game of the regular season is Saturday or Sunday for most teams, and so I'm not sure Tampa Bay their last game. I can look that up, but you don't necessarily want your goalie. Let's say we're just going to take a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning schedule because that's a far better thing to do. Okay, so they play Thursday, April 4th, for their second to last game. So that means that if he plays against Toronto, if Vasilevsky plays against Toronto, then you're giving him 6 days off in between games. I don't know if that's what you want.
That's true.
That's a long time. Like in hockey standards, that's a long time to take a rest, especially if you go into this series and you are hoping for maybe a quick out, 5 games. You maybe don't want to be rusty coming into it, especially considering whoever they play is playing playoff hockey right now. And Tampa Bay isn't. They're not having to. So that can make a big difference down the stretch. Sometimes you see game 1, the lower seed surprise the top seed because the top seed hasn't had to really play balls out for a month.
Well, Tampa's got Toronto on Thursday, at Toronto, mind you, and then at Boston on Saturday. So 2 teams that it depends. With Boston now, it could be a little bit different because depending on, if they have a good enough cushion against Toronto where they don't have to win, if they pretty much locked up that home ice, they might play some younger guys. You're going to see, regardless who you see in net, it's still going to be a challenge for, anybody. It's just not going to be a bad goaltender for Boston, but it'll be interesting to see. They might just play Charlie Coyle back as 20 minutes and then.
Yeah, but let's if the Bruins go and they lose to Columbus tonight, we're recording this on a Tuesday, April 2nd. So if they go in and they lose tonight, and then suddenly they play, and then they lose their next game, they're playing Tampa. Toronto wins a game, and that game all of a sudden is for home ice. That's a hell of a final game.
Oh, for sure.
To go for home ice.
Especially, it would be great if Tampa was tied at 62 wins, right? And now you've got them both playing for something really meaningful.
Right. I mean, I'll be honest. Yes, the goal is absolutely the Stanley Cup. That Red Wings team, now well seen as like a disappointing year because they didn't win the cup.
Swept New Jersey. Get out of here.
No, that wasn't that year. That was
I'm
the year
sorry,
before.
Colorado. Right.
They weren't swept by Colorado though. I think
they lost in the conference finals, but still.
They lost in 7. Yeah. So, it was, and that was an equally great team, I'd say. Right. But you still remember that team. Like people still remember the 62 win team. I don't remember the 06 Carolina Hurricanes as much as I would say I remember the 62 win team for Detroit. No one else has 62 wins. There's 100 other teams that have won the Stanley Cup. No one else has 62 wins.
Yeah.
If you can become that leader of 63 wins, that is, even if you don't win the cup, that's still an incredible year.
I even think it's 60 wins. We're going to remember this team for a long time because like we mentioned earlier, there's only 3 teams to ever hit 60. So that'll be something to just tip your cap to.
Montreal, Detroit, and then Tampa Bay. Which one is not like the other? So you're still sticking with Columbus and Carolina. They're the two that make it in there.
I am. You know what? It pretty much comes down to offense, right? And I think, no Paul Byron in Montreal. I think CP31 might be, might steal a game for them, but he's not going to be able to do it on his own. And I don't think they've got enough offensive firepower the way Carolina's playing right now, the way Columbus is playing right now. I don't know if they've got enough in the tank to really do it.
Islanders, Pittsburgh. Who do you think ends up with home ice there?
That'll be a great series, regardless.
That series has echoes back to the early '90s when the Islanders played the Penguins. Yes. And the Islanders beat them in what is it? It's triple overtime. I think it's going to be a great series because it's a team that the Islanders, no matter what, if they have home ice or not, they are going to be the underdogs. They've been the underdogs all year. Barry Trotz has them believing that they are the underdogs, and they have to play a certain way.
Trotz is quite familiar with Pittsburgh, too. Let's not forget that.
Yes,
a lot of runs in.
Very
a lot of run-ins. I think
a lot of runs.
A lot of runs, yeah. Pittsburgh, I think, probably ends up with home ice. I think they want that home ice. They've got to play Detroit in a home here. I think Detroit, for all the good intentions they've had to win, I just don't think they're really going to beat out Pittsburgh because I think Pittsburgh wants home ice right now.
Yeah.
I think the Islanders just look...
Goaltending has been huge for Pittsburgh. They've actually been getting some.
For once.
It's, it's really for the first time all year, they're getting some great goaltending. And so...
Yeah. And as inconsistent as all that's been for Pittsburgh throughout the year... we've seen them out. We've seen them fighting for a wild card, and now they're fighting for home ice here in the first round. I think now is the time for them to get consistent and get consistently good hockey from every area. Defense, forwards, the goaltending, which would be great for them to roll into the playoffs with.
Yeah, even Jack Johnson doesn't look horrible.
No, not really.
Oh, all right. Well, the Eastern Conference will be fun. To me, here's the matchups for the playoffs. This is at this point with 3 games left. I'm confident that Tampa Bay will be the 1 seed.
Confident.
And Washington also will. They'll with 2 games left. They need one point here. I think. Well, they need a win, which I think they'll get. I don't know if they'll beat Montreal because that's a big game. Montreal really needs it, but I think Washington will win that home ice. And I think that Washington probably ends up playing Columbus in the first round. As much as I'd like Tampa Bay to take them, I think it's a rematch of last year's first round. And then you're going to go Tampa and Carolina. And you've got Boston, Toronto. And then I do think that the Penguins are going to come back, overtake the Islanders, and take home ice. But it's going to be a fun series. And that'll be your first round. That's, I think, pretty likely. Montreal could get in, and then Montreal plays Tampa Bay. That's really the only difference there that could be.
And then it's like New Jersey and Tampa from last year, basically.
Right.
It's a wash.
Now the difference, though, is that Carey Price. I mean,
that's true.
When the games are big, he can show up, and so I think when I consider would I rather play Carolina or Montreal, I think I'd rather play Carolina. As good as Carolina can be, they don't have the same level of depth. And their goaltending, as good as it's been, doesn't scare me. It doesn't scare me.
No, I would absolutely agree with that. I think, like we talked about in the last show, Mrazek has had playoff success before in terms of just good goaltending.
He's played well, but he hasn't really.
No, I mean he hasn't
a series.
No. But I mean, again, he's played well. McElhinney, 0 experience there in the playoffs. So again, like you said, Carey Price versus either one of those two. Even on Carey Price on an average day, I would still probably take.
Is McElhinney the new Craig Anderson?
The new Craig Anderson.
Right, like Craig Anderson kind of, it was maybe a little bit sort of like a Tim Thomas where he's a little older, already in his 30s, and kind of, hey, he's a start. Like he can be a good starter for you. Maybe not like a start 65 games a year, but start 45, 50 games a year, and maybe he's a decent starter. Maybe he gets
he's a
shot.
Band-Aid.
Yes, but he might get a shot next year to be a starter somewhere.
I think Carolina would probably keep him. Why wouldn't you try to sign this guy for another year?
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, let's... we'll scoot on over to the Western Conference.
The West.
Where it has become a little less obvious as to what's going to happen here because the St. Louis Blues can't lose, and the Predators and the Winnipeg Jets just don't seem to want to secure anything. I mean, I'm surprised with 3 games left to go that none of these teams have 100 points yet. That's pretty surprising. You know, we've seen teams squeak into the playoffs with like 94 points. There's actually, I wonder, you know, when all is said and done, you know, we've seen teams miss the playoffs at like 95 points before. And this year, I mean, you might make the playoffs with 90 points in the West.
Rough.
You could. There is a like it's Colorado could end up making the playoffs with 89 points. I think that might be the lowest amount of points a team has since they changed the way that everything works in the standings with the shootout and all that. I think that might be the lowest amount of points that a team's ever gotten to make the playoffs.
It could.
We need to check on that. We'll find out. We'll find out and we'll tweet it later. But or if you can figure that out for us, tweet us at OT Hockey Talk.
I think regardless, when you talk about teams that haven't hit 100 points like Winnipeg and Nashville, right? As bad as the rest of the West has been with teams like, you know, Chicago, Vancouver, Edmonton, these teams in the West have had opportunities to capitalize on some wins where they just haven't. And so now they're, like we said, a team like St. Louis is just coming out of nowhere and might actually steal first place.
Yes. Yeah, I know. And that's St. Louis might have it might have home ice advantage until the conference finals.
They were at the bottom of the West.
Pretty
I think
darn
in November.
close to it. Pretty darn close. Were they at the very bottom?
They were at the very bottom.
Yeah,
and now
that's impressive. It's one thing to battle back and to like squeak into that wild card. It's a whole other thing to battle back and all of a sudden you're the best team in a division.
Right.
That's a division that we deemed the best division in hockey.
Right.
In the NHL. I mean,
that we said could have 5 playoff teams.
Right. And it looks like they will.
Yeah.
Colorado's in the Central.
They are.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And Arizona will be there soon,
Arizona's
too.
about to be in the Central. So yeah, you're looking at basically the entire division outside. And I mean, really, when you consider it, the bottom 4 teams in the West are all in the Pacific Division.
Terrible.
Absolutely god awful. Obviously we know Calgary has clinched the West. And so the Calgary Flames will play likely the Colorado Avalanche is, where it's looking. I don't think that at this point Arizona makes the playoffs. I just think even though those 2 points seem like nothing, I just don't, Colorado, they get to play Edmonton tonight. So obviously that could open up, if they were to lose that game, I guess that opens it up. They'll play Winnipeg and San Jose. So not easy games to close out the year, but San Jose is locked in where they are. They're not going anywhere. And then Arizona, man, they've got to play LA, which is easy, but then they play Vegas and Winnipeg. So to me, neither of these teams have each of them have one easy game, Edmonton, LA for both of them. And then you've got tough games. And so I don't see Arizona making up those 2 points, especially since Colorado has what would be the tiebreaker, even though they have the same amount of regulation overtime wins.
The goals for
the goals for is the next one, yeah.
Yeah.
Or is it the head-to-head? It's the head-to-head matchup, isn't it? I don't know what the head-to-head matchup is between these two teams, and I don't really want to scroll through to find it. So, but we can find that in a minute. I guess really the biggest toss-up is what happens in the Central, because you could have St. Louis be first and then Winnipeg, Nashville play each other in the first round
instead of the second. That's like everybody thought
in the first round. That's a ballsy first round, because
St.
even
Louis
though
would
Calgary's been so good, and even though St. Louis is surging, I think you're still seeing the two best teams in the Western Conference. They might play each other in the first round.
I might argue at this point, I'm kind of leaning towards Vegas maybe being the best team in the West, but that's just me right now, the way they've been playing. But in terms of, I guess, the teams that everybody picked at the beginning of the year, right? They said it was going to be Nashville or Winnipeg. Basically, the cup from the West was going to run through one of those two teams. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Winnipeg hasn't really looked like Winnipeg lately. And I was listening to the radio on the way over here, and I can't remember who it was, a reporter from Winnipeg. They said the best scenario might actually be for Winnipeg to play Nashville because they ramp it up. They know how to turn it up against Nashville. They played very good against them, and they play their style of hockey.
It was a 7-game series. It wasn't an easy series.
No. Yeah. It likely won't be an easy series for them again this time, but Winnipeg I think Winnipeg has a greater chance of getting back to themselves, playing more like themselves if they did play Nashville first round. If you have to go out and play Dallas actually to me could be, in terms of a wild card team, either conference. I would peg them as the team that I feel could be an upsetter more likely than any other one.
And if you are Dallas, you've got to be cheering for St. Louis because I think you want St. Louis.
Absolutely. With a healthy Ben Bishop, gosh.
Yeah.
You could steal that series.
Find their way into the next round, and then, you'd end up playing either Nashville or Winnipeg. You get that second round matchup instead. Yeah, I mean, as far as the Pacific goes, I think it's pretty all locked up. I'm looking forward to a Calgary, Colorado first round. I think that's likely what we're looking at, and that is going to be fast. I think that Colorado is going to be overwhelmed ultimately because I think Calgary can just score in bunches. They're the highest scoring team in the Western Conference, and there's not many teams that have scored more goals than them. I mean, there's only one, and it's Tampa.
Yeah, and Tampa's the only team with a better differential than them as well. So they know how to keep the pucks out of the net. Yeah,
so it'll be I do think Mike Smith will get the nod.
Do you?
I do.
Wow.
I think Mike Smith's going to get the nod for the playoffs.
I don't think so, but that's just me.
I just think that experience, you talk about it a lot.
No, and I agree with you. I do think Mike Smith would be the better choice, but I do think Calgary is going to go with Rittich in the first round.
David Rittich. Thanks, Luke. Our last show, I don't know why, we called him, I'll bet. Okay, we both, we type out notes before the show, and Justin had typed in some potential goalie battles for the playoffs, and you typed David Ritchie.
Did I?
And I saw it, and I just I saw it and thought, oh yeah, that's the other Calgary goalie. I know it. I've watched him play lots, and in my brain it was like something feels weird about this Ritchie thing. I mean, there are players in the NHL, 2 of them in fact with the last name Ritchie. So I just kind of went with it, and I was like, Luke tweeted at my brother Luke. He's been on the show. He tweeted and said, I think it's hilarious. You guys said David Ritchie 20 times in your podcast, and he doesn't exist.
I can't believe I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it was, and we weren't even drunk.
Wow, that's sad too.
We rarely drink before the show. I don't think we've ever. No. We should try. Yeah, I mean, which series are you most looking forward to first round in the Western Conference?
I think, boy, it's going to be a toss-up between if St. Louis can steal the Central, right? Then you get Winnipeg, Nashville, and then San Jose, Vegas. Those 2 series are going to be so flipping good.
For all the people that say that the way that the playoff system kind of screws with a lot of things,
right?
I mean, we're about to see. There's a high probability that we are going to see a Winnipeg, Nashville, San Jose, Vegas, Boston, Toronto, and then a Washington, Columbus first round. And I would venture to say that outside of Tampa Bay, those may be all the best teams in the NHL.
They might be, yeah.
I
would swap out Pittsburgh for Columbus, but still, I mean, okay.
I didn't. Oh, you think that Pittsburgh is better than Columbus?
Yeah, I do.
I'm wondering. I don't know. Pittsburgh has higher end talent.
I think
but
come
not
playoff
as much
time.
depth.
No.
And depth wins in the playoffs. And so does goaltending. And Columbus,
that's true,
I would say at this point, has superior goaltending, but Bobrovsky's never been able to put it all together in the playoffs. So we'll see if this is finally the year. He's already going to get paid no matter where he goes, but I do think that if he can finally perform in the playoffs, I think he might make himself an extra $1 million a year.
I was about to say, yeah, he might cost himself $1 million if he doesn't perform well. But regardless, yeah. I don't know. I think, boy, I hope for San Jose that Carlson, they get healthy and Martin Jones can find his game a little bit, because if not, Vegas is going to run all over them real fast, I think. And as far as Nashville, Winnipeg, regardless if they're healthy or playing, like both teams really can play, it's still going to be a fun series.
It's going to be unbelievable. I mean, even if it's St. Louis and Nashville, that's still going to be a good series. It's definitely a tougher pull for Nashville this year as opposed to last year. Last year, in the first round, they played Colorado and they just kind of ran all over them. So
6 games.
It was a 6-game series, but you never were really worried.
No.
It was like, wow, Colorado got off to a fast start. And then, Colorado won some games. They were able to surprise them with some speed. I don't suspect that Calgary gets caught off guard by Colorado's speed. It's just not going to happen.
Nope.
And Calgary, we kind of shuffle them to the side because of the other teams in the West, and they haven't been this good in a while. It's easy to pick the Winnipegs and the Nashvilles because they've been good for several years, and we know what to expect when we get them. Calgary's a little more of a wild card. Calgary is kind of taking over Nashville for having the best defense in the West.
They very well could. But for me, Calgary, the only thing that scares me is their goaltending. I am worried for Calgary because of their goaltending.
Yeah, they can score so many goals.
They could. They're like Tampa Bay in the West. So
yeah,
very well.
Well, I think that's pretty good for playoff stuff. I want to just get your thoughts on some awards.
Some awards
here. Now that we are basically at the end, I don't think that our awards are going to change based on the last 3 games of the season. So we won't necessarily do every single one of them, but I do want to get your thoughts on a few of them. The Kucherov has been thrown out as the hands down, no one else is touching him. He's the MVP and no one else. To me, I think that it's worth definitely having the discussion of other players because Kucherov is on the best team in the league. So certainly is he the best player on the best team in the league? Yes. Is that what the trophy is? No. The trophy isn't.
No, talk about Taylor Hall last year, right?
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. He's, you're scoring so many of your team's goals. Now it's not, Kucherov still is, Kucherov's still in on over 30% of his team's goals. His team scored a ton of goals and hasn't really needed, Tampa Bay without Kucherov is still fantastic.
Right. They'd still be an easy 50 win team.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're still going to make the playoffs. They're still going to be a top 3 team in the division.
They've got 3 guys with 90-plus points on that team.
Right,
so you cry me a river.
And so how crucial is Kucherov to that team's success as compared to, to me, Ovechkin is even more valuable to the Capitals than Kucherov is to Tampa. Now, maybe that's where the award should just be, it's the Art Ross Trophy. That's why we have the Art Ross Trophy. You get the trophy for getting the most points. The most points doesn't mean you're the most valuable player in the league.
Yeah, Connor McDavid certainly didn't win it last year.
Sidney Crosby, is there a player without Sidney Crosby? The Penguins aren't even in the playoffs. No chance. They're not in the playoffs.
No, sometimes I do get a little upset though that you have to be in the playoffs to win the trophy because I feel like
it's kind of just that.
No,
otherwise,
I
what was the season? It was pointless.
Right. I understand it. But for instance, last year, right? Connor McDavid, those last few games or last few, couple months where they were pretty much out, he went on a tear. But to me, I look at a guy like Alexander Barkov, right?
Yeah, but
he's playing unreal hockey right now. He's picked that team up, put him on his back. Same with Patrick Kane, 2 guys that I think deserve to have their name in the conversation. However, they're not making the playoffs, so they're not going to be winning that award.
Just kind of there has to be, to me, some place where you go, we gotta
draw the line.
We gotta draw a line. Now, is it the most valuable player on a playoff team? No, you're right. That isn't the trophy. It is the most valuable player to your team. Is Connor McDavid the most valuable player on his team? Yes, but even if he wasn't there, they'd still miss the playoffs. So to me, that's where there has to be some sort of, because of this player, we achieved this level of success. Without him, we wouldn't have been in this place. And that was absolutely Taylor Hall last year. Without Taylor Hall, the Devils were, you can go and look at the standings. They've been without Taylor Hall for some time.
Oh, my God.
And that's where they sit.
That
is the difference. It's like a 25-point difference from last year. And Taylor Hall hasn't played like half the year. So, I mean, that's to me, that is what that trophy embodies, is a player that without them, your team is nothing.
Okay, fair enough.
That's to me, that's Sidney Crosby this year.
You make a good argument.
Without the Penguins, without the Penguins, Sidney Crosby is nothing as well.
Yeah,
But
Malkin has not. I mean, Malkin's been okay this year, but like you said,
right?
Sidney Crosby's carried that team, just like Ovechkin maybe has pushed Washington a little bit further than maybe they should have, because the rest of the team around them, like Kuznetsov, not playing as hot this year as he was last year, and
right,
without
still a really good player.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
Still, I think come playoff time, it's going to be a different story. I mean, I think that you could go as far to say that. You look at Ryan O'Reilly in the season that he's having with St. Louis. I mean, would St. Louis be where they were without Ryan O'Reilly?
No, I think he and Binghamton, to me, all year long have been the reason that they've gotten anywhere close to, snagging this first place in the Central, because of those two guys. I mean, geez, I was listening to a report the other day, and they were talking about O'Reilly, right? Beginning of the year, he didn't want to come in and step on toes, right? So he kept his mouth shut. He just sort of sat back in the locker room and let guys do their thing. And they were failing, right? Coach gets fired. They bring in Berube, and now Riley's speaking up, and boom, look what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I've listened to some things, like some podcasts with Ryan O'Reilly, and he's definitely that like all out hard worker. Like in the off season, he's trying to find new ways to train and new ways to push his body, and he tries, and that. Like you watch his game, and you're like, that's a guy who he's got a lot of skill, but he tries so much harder than the next guy. And so maybe where if he didn't put in the same level of effort, he would be a good second line guy. But because of his effort level, he's a really good number one center.
Yeah, he wins every phase.
Not that he's not like top 10 centers in the league, but because of his effort, I mean, he's putting himself in the conversation.
I mean, because you could probably make the argument that he might be a top 10 just because the value he brings both defensively and offensively, and the fact that he wins almost every single faceoff he ever takes, which is just insane to me. Yeah, but I mean, jeez,
he's a power play monster too. I mean, 20 points on the power play is solid, but I mean, I don't think without Ryan O'Reilly, the St. Louis Blues team doesn't turn it around.
I would agree.
So I just think that there's more to this trophy than the most points, and that's where it's boring to me. You win the most points, that's fine. If you have the most points and you win the Art Ross, and you're the only reason your team makes the playoffs, okay, but it's just too hard to gauge, because Tampa without Kucherov is still fantastic. And so if they go and they win the Stanley Cup and Kucherov rips it up in the playoffs too, I say give him the Conn Smythe, because it's one team. You're the MVP of the playoffs for your team when you win in the playoffs, and so that's fair. But when it comes to just basically what it is the best player on playoff teams who without him wouldn't make it, I think it's Sidney Crosby.
Okay.
Let's go Norris Trophy.
Norris.
You still give it to Victor Hedman, because you gave it to Victor Hedman the last time.
I did. Boy. I think all around, he's still the best defenseman in the league. And I think if I had to pick one defenseman right now to just say, okay, I'm going to build a team around, it would still be him.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. If Giordano was 27 years old, would you change your tune?
No, I would still take Hedman, I think. Although, boy, it's right now, it's coming down to a three-headed race. Right now, I think it's Burns, Giordano, and Riley right now. I think everybody's going to look at the point totals.
Well, I think Hedman is going to be in there.
He will. He'll be in the conversation, and he might edge out Riley for top three.
I don't see Riley getting in there.
No. So it's going to be tough, but I think given the way Calgary played last year and the way they've turned things around this year, I think Giordano right now is probably one of the biggest reasons for that, and he'll get it because of it. And you look at his numbers, and he's almost a point per game. He's plus 39 right now.
Almost 80 points.
I know, and he's playing 24 minutes a game, so it's not like he's one of those guys like Tyson Barrie that only logged 21 minutes a game, and yet still, I mean, they still have good numbers, but it's easier to make an argument for a guy who plays a lot of minutes because he's seeing the top lines a lot.
Yes, yeah, and the Norris Trophy, I think, from what it's become is like, all right, who has the most points? Did you see? Oh gosh, who was it? Oh, it's Drew Doughty talking about Brent Burns.
Oh, yeah.
He said that watch him play, and you'll see him just cough the puck up 3 times a game. He's
Right.
like, he's not a Norris Trophy guy.
Loved it.
Shouldn't
Loved it.
be.
And that's why you can make the argument, too, that you need like a best defensive defenseman and best offensive defenseman trophy.
It should just go and have like an Art Ross Trophy version of the defense.
Okay.
Like, hey, here's the highest scoring defenseman in the league. Go Bobby Orr Trophy. You know, Bobby Orr led the league in scoring, but he also led defensemen in scoring many times. Go the Bobby Orr Memorial Trophy or something. I don't know what you want to call it. He's not dead, so I guess it wouldn't be a memorial trophy. But, you know, okay, so the Orr Trophy, and then the offense or defense trophy. And then you go and you have the actual, like, hey, here's the defenseman who was the most valuable defenseman on his team. That would be a better way. Who's the most valuable defenseman in the league? Because at that point, I don't think, like, it could still be Hedman, certainly. I mean, we'll see. Hedman's going to miss these games, and we'll see. But Giordano, to me, wins that hands down. If it's the most valuable defenseman.
Sure, at that point,
what team needs that defenseman more than anyone else? Calgary.
Yeah, and I do think it also comes down to, too, I mean, it's going to be another situation where, like, you're not going to give it to a team that's maybe not in the playoffs, right? Like Keith Yandel, phenomenal year right now.
Sure.
But you're not going to give it to him because his team
had a great
isn't
18
winning.
months.
Yeah.
Keith Yandel.
He really has. Or Thomas Chabot, for example, another guy who's had a phenomenal season, but you're not going to give it to him because he's not in the...
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think there should be a trophy for the most points for a defenseman. It's an important. I mean, that guy is so important on a team. If you get, I mean, Mark Giordano, he's so important. He's got a ton of points. Morgan Riley is really important. So is Brent Burns. Not all of them are. See, I don't think Morgan Riley is a top 5 defenseman in the NHL. But can he put up points like them because he's got a lot of good players around him? Sure.
Right.
Sure, and he can maybe he's stretches his wings a little bit because he's got really good players around him, and he feels like he can take those chances because his guys are going to bury them and not miss the net, have it wrap around the net and go all the way down the other way, and he's trapped and they score against him. If you have confidence in the players around you, then you're going to take chances as a defenseman. It's going to result in more points for you.
Also, I vote if we call it the Bobby Orr Trophy, let's give him a giant oar. Just this big paddle. Just hand them that.
I love it. Let's just shift to the Vezina because that's best for. Essentially, we vote best forward, best goaltender, and now or best defenseman, now best goaltender. So where are you landing? Especially, I mean, Bobrovsky's now really taking the reins for Columbus. Does he put himself in the conversation if they go and win? Let's say they win their last 8 games of the regular season. And they find themselves in the playoffs, and it's because of Bobrovsky. Does he suddenly enter the conversation for Vezina, or is there someone else that you think other guys deserve to be there?
Boy, I think there are a lot of quality goaltenders this year. I think more so than any other year where I'm like, just looking at these guys and I say they have to be in the conversation, right? So Vasilevsky, Bobrovsky, right? Number 1 and number 2 in wins in the league. And they've got the stats to back it up too when you terms of like save percentage and other things like that. But then you have other goaltenders who have been just otherworldly because, their team gives up either a lot of shots or maybe the defense in front of them just isn't as good. And so other goaltenders like that, I look at and say Ben Bishop or Frederik Andersen, right? Who sees about 100 shots a game against him, but still manages to put up phenomenal numbers. And of course, you're going to see Marc-Andre Fleury's name in that conversation as well. So, boy, you know what? I think the league's going to give it to Vasilevsky just because how good of a season Tampa's had. But in my heart, I want Ben Bishop to win this thing.
Wow, Ben Bishop to win the...
I really do.
See, I just don't think he's only played 45 games.
Sure, and that's going to be a knock against him. But
I just don't think that's enough. And whereas, you look at other guys who... And now, okay, what if Montreal makes the playoffs? Are we going? It was Carey Price that got them to the playoffs.
No,
he's got a .917 save percentage, 34 wins. At that point, maybe 35, 36 wins.
It's not otherworldly though, because then you can look at a guy like Jordan Binghamton, who has a .928 save percentage of 1.85 goals against average.
Hasn't played that many.
30 games.
Yeah,
but still, I mean, 22 wins. That's some good numbers there. And then of course you're going to make the knock on guys like Robin Lehner and Ben Bishop too, because they also have phenomenal other goaltenders playing alongside them. Khudobin, Greiss, these guys have been great this season. So, it makes it very difficult to say that they're the reason, this guy's the number 1 or this guy's the number 1.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously in Dallas, it's clear who the number 1 is, but still, it's like, okay, could they have been just as good with Khudobin all year? Maybe.
Yeah, probably not though.
Probably not, but there's still that chance.
Yeah, and to me again, if we want to look at this, like, what goalie is the most valuable goalie to his team?
Darcy Kemper.
But they're not even in the playoffs.
I know.
Now, I would say that there's three names. Vasilevsky I'll put in there because he is so stinking good. Although, I mean, Louis Dominguez did win 10 games in a row. So that to me goes...
And he had like a 3 goals against average, though, in those 10 games. So I'm not... Get that trash out.
To me, Vasilevsky is certainly has to be in the conversation. I mean, the guy has almost 40 wins this year. Likely, but if he wins his last two starts, if they start him 2 more times, 40 wins. That's a great season. Only lost 10 games in regulation, which is far away from the next guy, Anderson, who's lost 15 for a guy starting more than 50 games. To me, it's Anderson, and then you're also throwing in either maybe Fleury. Is Vegas as close or as far away from these teams trailing as they would be if Fleury hadn't been so good mid-season? Remember when they were struggling before they got Mark Stone? He was really he was getting shutouts,
and they didn't play. They weren't playing Subban a single game because his numbers were horrid.
Were so bad. Yeah,
they were terrible. Yeah. So you had to lean on him so hard, and I'm glad he's finally getting a little bit of rest here. So hopefully he's fresh for the playoffs.
Yeah, but also now at the end of the year, the way Bobrovsky's been playing, and he has 9 shutouts.
He's throwing his name in that conversation.
Yeah, I think he's got to be in there,
especially if Columbus makes playoffs.
Yeah, I think that maybe where Frederik Andersen doesn't get in there, doesn't get in the conversation. Well, he's in the conversation, but he's not top 3.
Whereas, 1 shutout for Anderson this year. 1 shutout.
Yeah,
that's not good in my
but
book.
his defense is. I'd say out of all the 4, Vasilevsky, Bobrovsky, and Fleury, he is the worst defense.
I'll agree with you. Absolutely.
Maybe by far.
Absolutely.
So he's definitely had some high quality scoring chances against him, and so to me, it's one of those 4 guys are the guys for the Vezina for me, and I guess fair. I'd give it to Vasilevsky because he truly has had a magical season, and it's too bad he got hurt because I think we would have seen him probably play an extra 10 games and maybe pushing that 45, 46 win season, which is like up there in the top wins of all time for goaltenders in a season. So that's guys these days don't push those numbers anymore, because they're not starting 75 games anymore. So, well, okay, we'll stick with those main awards. We'll go through everything once the season's over and we have a little lull between the season and the playoffs.
We'll really deep dive into it.
Yes, absolutely. If you have some thoughts, some things that you want us to talk about heading into the playoffs, let us know at OT Hockey Talk on Twitter. Other than that, enjoy these last 3 games of the regular season, and playoffs are coming, baby. They're almost here.
Freaking pumped.
So excited. All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon.